My name is Hadija Gabunga, and I'm an accessory designer. I basically just started this really neat idea. It's called a Hipband. That's the basis of the company. And it's just as it says, just a band that sits on your lower the bottom of your jeans. You can layer it, add a bit of length. I got into it completely accidentally. It's just one of these things that happened a couple years ago, and before I know it, it's my daily bread.
Really? And so is that exclusively what you make now?
That is. That's my full-time job. That's what I do. Yeah.
And you don't make like any belts or earrings or anything else?
No, I've added to the line as well. I'm starting a bunch of scarves as well. It's all on the website. But the main product is the Hipband. I do also have an offshoot of that for maternity. So same idea, but they're longer. Gives you that layer. Yeah, basic concept is the same. Layering without the bulk of a full shirt.
Sure.
Yeah.
And do you have a sense of like what inspires you in terms of your color choice and fabric choice and some of that sort of stuff?
Everything inspires me, actually. The main thing that actually does is where I come from. I grew up in Africa. So as far as vibrant colors and patterns, that's what I know. I find just a way to express myself. It happens naturally. When I do look for fabrics, it's all about the prints. A lot of them have sort of this like bold patterns to them, really vibrant sort of East African colors, actually. That's where I was born.
Are there particularly Canadian, because obviously this project is this Canadian thing,
Absolutely,
are there Canadian, let's start with Canadian ideas or Canadian landscapes or anything Canadian that inspires you?
Well, I thought about your project, and it's funny how it kind of combines where I came from and where I am. I kind of see my product as adapting to my environment. I mean, I went from plus 30 to minus 30. And I find with layering here, I always felt kind of overwhelmed with having to bundle up and putting on a bunch of different stuff on to keep warm. And it's funny how the Hipband has kind of allowed me literally to do full circle. You know, I can still layer, be warm, but I'm kind of adapting to my environment, if that makes any sense.
Sure. Well, and yours is a very like Canadian experience, right? To be from somewhere else and come here and make a life here.
Yeah.
Are there Canadian designers who inspire you at all or who you admire?
There's a lot, actually. Funny enough, since doing what I'm doing full time, I've met a lot of fantastic artisans from all over Canada. I do travel around and do trade shows and such. There's a ton. I couldn't even give them all credit if I mentioned just one, but from all over, from Pico Apparel, she's a great, fantastic designer from Calgary. There's Melody, she does a line called Precocious, she's from Toronto. And the neat thing about both these girls, they recycle. They do a lot of sort of take something and work it and then add a twist to it and make it modern. But yeah, there's so many. There's artisans, the pottery, to jewelry, there's a ton.
Are there any particular challenges you think that are specific to Canadians, Canadian designers, I mean, in terms of maybe accessing other markets or accessing the US market or anything like that?
Yeah, I would think so. And the other thing I found personally with trying to expand my line within Canada is having sort of the resources to do that. So whether it's trade shows that I go to or having boutique owners interested in the product and expanding it that way. But for the most part, I find as far as keeping it local, especially in Alberta, Calgary, there's a lot of support. There is, I find more and more markets that you can sell at, trade shows. It is becoming a lot better. One of the really neat shows in Toronto, the One of a Kind show, is just a really good example for that. It's a huge show. They have, I'd say over 600 artisans or something crazy like that. And it's really neat. It's all Canadian, one of a kind, like it says. And yeah, so it's great.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And now let's talk about where your products come from. So tell me about the manufacturing process.
The manufacturing. When I initially started, my dad's very business savvy. So as soon as he knew about the product, he was like, you need to get these made. And I was like, okay, well, what's that entail and what that is involved? And he actually initially, about 6 years ago now, found a small sewing contractor here in Calgary, and they helped me with it. So what I had to do was basically make a sample, kind of discuss it with them, and they thought it was a really neat product, and that was it. Currently, I've grown, and I'm getting more stores to carry them, doing more shows, so I've had to look elsewhere. So they're currently made in Toronto. Yeah, it's still a smaller production company, but within Canadian as well.
Sure, yeah. I mean, my aunt is a fashion designer in New York, and she does gloves and gloves now. And I mean, all her gloves were made in Italy, but she had to eventually go overseas to China because it was competitive. Have you found economic pressure to do that?
It's very tempting just because it is on that scale. You can, mass produce thousands for such a cheap amount money, but I find I like having, I like to hop on a plane and be able to go and be like, what's, production control, basically. I find with, say if I had to make, 10,000 and they're made overseas and something's not right with them, for me personally anyways, I find it's a little bit more, there's pros and cons to it, right? I would prefer getting them made here. I like the accessibility, I like having to have somewhat production control and keeping it local, supporting the economy. I mean, I always find it all comes back.
Excellent.